let's talk a little bit about where the Penguins stand at this point in the offseason. They just avoided salary arbitration with restricted free agent Nick Robertson. 2 years, $3.25 million for Nick Robertson. I talked about that move and that decision extensively on Thursday's episode of Tip of the Iceberg, so I'll leave that alone for now. But with that signing, that leaves one player, one singular player, unsigned for the Penguins, and that's Ville Koivunen. The question I have is, should we be worried about this? I mean, the Penguins are stacked at wing. Everybody and their mother has made that comment. Hey, look at the Penguins. They got 13, 14, 15 wingers. Like, take Sidney Crosby, and if you want to put Tommy Novak squarely in the category of center, take him, take Blake Lizotte, take Ben Kindle out of the equation. There's still 14 or 15 guys that have a genuine shot of making the opening night NHL roster at the wing position. So Ville Koivunen on the outside is going to be joining a very crowded room, per se, at the winger position. But I would still look at him as one of the better options that you have going into next season. Obviously not more than a Brian Rust or Rickard Rakell, but if you look at the bottom six and you look at who they could potentially turn to, not just on opening night, but as that first injury fill-in, there are a few players that have more offensive upside than Ville Koivunen, especially if you're looking at the prospects that are technically, quote, NHL-ready prospects. Rutger McGroarty, Avery Hayes, Tristan Brose, I like all of them, and I'm not saying they don't have offensive upside, but they don't have as much offensive upside as Ville Koivunen could potentially have going into this season. You look at what Koivunen was able to do last year. AHL, he scored 13 goals, 41 points in 34 games. Clearly, on the offensive side of the ice, he is outmatching other people with his pedigree. You look at the Calder Cup playoffs, where basically everybody on Wilkes-Barre had a hand in that run to the Eastern Conference Final, but Ville Koivunen had 4 goals, 9 points in 15 games. So right there along with a lot of the better players on the team, the higher scoring players on the team, Ville Koivunen was there making an impact. The only issue is it didn't translate to the NHL, right? We saw it at the tail end of the 2024-25 season. He got an opportunity, played in 7 games, scored 8 points. Now, they were all assists, but still, he was playing in the top 6. He looked like he fit on an NHL roster. He looked like the speed wasn't too much for him. So yeah, everybody was excited going into last season. But in 39 games, yeah, I know, it's hard to remember that he played nearly half a season with the Penguins. In 39 games, Ville Koivunen only had 7 points, only 2 goals in that time. Now, there are still 2 months to training camp, so this could be something that is resolved, who knows, potentially by the time this episode airs, before I get it edited and to you. But this isn't nothing that we've reached this point of the offseason and Ville Koivunen remains unsigned. Now, he's not arbitration eligible, so there's really no timeline between now and training camp. I guess training camp would be the timeline for them to get a deal done. It's a significant piece in my eyes because, yeah, the Penguins have some pretty talented wingers. Andrei Kuzmenko has scored 39 goals before, but at the same time, they are dart throws, and sometimes you miss when you take a chance like that. Kyle Dubas didn't miss last offseason. Justin Brazeau had a career year. You know, he hit a home run by acquiring Igor Chinikov. Parker Wotherspoon was knocked out of the park. But can you do it again? Not all the time are you going to pick up a player and he's going to be the best version of himself. It helps when you have a head coach like Dan Muse, who now has a 1-year track record of basically turning everything into gold. But there's a chance that players falter. There's a chance always that players get injured. And you need to have people that step into that role to carry the load while those initial players are injured. And Ville Koivunen has always been a player that has the talent He just needed to put it together at the NHL level. He's great at the AHL level, but he just needs to put it together at the NHL level. I mean, if you look at potential injury replacements in the top six, if one of those guys go down, I think I talked about it on Thursday. Yeah, Nick Robertson would be high on my list. Andrei Kuzmenko would be high on my list. But outside of those two, I'm looking at Ville Koivunen. I feel like if Ville Koivunen had an opportunity to play a little bit longer on the top line, maybe he'd gain some momentum, maybe he'd gain some confidence, and he'd play more like himself at the NHL level. If you watch what he was in 39 games at the NHL, take out the points. If you watch the style of player he was at the NHL level last year versus the style of player he was at the AHL, specifically the Calder Cup playoffs, they're two different guys. He has a confidence and almost a slight cockiness about him in the AHL, and it's because he knows he is one of the best players at that level. He needs to carry himself like that at the NHL level. You need to have a little bit of delusion if you're Ville Koivunen, because you're nerfing yourself otherwise. You're not bringing the best version of yourself. You're not giving yourself the best opportunity to hit and stick and contribute in a major way at the NHL level. So I'm hoping that's what we see. I'm hoping we see a deal get done, and I'm hoping we see Ville Koivunen start to be Ville Koivunen that everybody in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania is already familiar with. He needs to introduce that version of himself to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And if it doesn't happen, I'm not saying it was a horrendous trade, because I will never say it was a horrendous trade, because some of the pieces that are still with the organization today. But the Jake Gensel trade just isn't aging all that well. I mean, there are some very, very good parts of that that are still affecting the Penguins organization and will affect the Penguins organization for years to come. In fact, that second round pick that they got, which was a conditional first, ended up being Harrison Brunick. And that could be a top 4 right shot defenseman for you for the next decade. He is so talented. That is the crown jewel of that return as of right now. But you also got Michael Bunting, which has turned into a couple of other pretty important pieces, right? Michael Bunting gave you a good year plus. He scored some big goals. He was a fan favorite. He was somebody that you could root for a couple years. But they then turned that into Tommy Novak, who had a good year last year, who is currently your second line center, which is important when you're trying to kind of toe the line between rebuild and contention, like Kyle Dubas has. So getting Tommy Novak is great. And in fact, that could turn into more, trade tree type of stuff if the Penguins are able to find another second line center and wind up moving Tommy Novak, because there's just too much at that position then. But they also acquired Luke Schenn in the Michael Bunting trade, which didn't work out. He didn't want to stay in Pittsburgh, and that was his right. He made it known, and the Penguins did right by him. They sent him to a contender. But what did they get in return? They got a second round pick that has now turned into Marcus Ruck, who was the CHL leader in scoring last year, plus a 2027 fourth round pick that we have yet to see what they wind up doing with that. They could pick the player, and then we have to follow that player along as part of the Gensel trade tree, or they could trade that as part of a bigger trade to get them, who knows, maybe that turns into Jason Robertson, which just takes this trade tree into a completely different direction. So there have been good. I'm not trying to say that Kyle Dubas got fleeced in that deal. But if you look at the other 4 pieces, I mean, that is 2 pieces of a 6-piece trade for the Penguins. The other 4 pieces, especially if Ville Koivunen is not back with the organization next year, it's rough to look at. The 5th round pick was not given to the Penguins because the condition was not met. The Hurricanes did not win the Stanley Cup, so they don't even get the 5th round pick. Vasily Ponomarev, who was the most NHL ready of the guys that they were able to get outside of Michael Bunting, he's now with the KHL. That didn't work out. Cruz Lucius, who is a very good prospect, and he's a rising prospect. As we found out late last season, he has not signed with the Penguins, and unless something changes, which it could, it doesn't feel like Cruz Lucius is going to sign with the Penguins. It feels like he's going to play out his college time, and he's going to sign somewhere else, similar to what the Penguins did. Did they do that with John Marino, or did he just I'd have to go back and look at it. But Cruz Lucius, not a Penguin. And then if you add Ville Koivunen to that as well, there's questions now about that. It just makes the Jake Gensel trade age a little bit more poorly than I think anybody would have hoped.